Rev up your engines!
Well, here's a really funny story about problems with Nissan. A Nissan Frontier driver found that there were missing frame welds on his truck. The frame was not welded together, but it was a certified pre-owned truck. So you got the problem, Nissan didn't build it right in the first place, and then it's only a year old. Pre-certified truck, shows it means nothing. Pre-owned vehicle, they're used vehicles, right? And then they say, oh, this has gone through this rigorous inspection process. Nonsense. I know guys that work at car dealerships, they don't get paid hardly anything for inspecting a car before they buy it. The used car lots often have no affiliation with the new car lots. They will not allow the good mechanics at the new car lots to work on the used cars in most cases, from my experience. So they're certified pre-owned. It's just a bunch of nonsense. The frame wasn't even welded. They didn't even look under there and look and say, anything wrong here? Oh, gee, look at all the welds that are missing on the frame. He bought a 2023 Frontier 4x4. He got it as a certified pre-owned unit with 14,000 miles. He finds out the frame isn't even welded together right. That shows you, Nissan doesn't make them very well, but so much for their certified pre-owned cars. Those words mean nothing. Just like lifetime warranty, it means nothing too, because there's always restrictions. Read the fine print to see what isn't covered, and you'll find out most things aren't covered. Or they'll say, well, your engine went out, but you didn't maintain it right, so we're not giving you another engine. Think of all kinds of excuses, but stupid certified pre-owned vehicles, the words mean nothing. Realize that. If you're going to buy a used car, pay a mechanic like me to check it out before you buy it, because if you don't, you might end up like this guy. It's a certified pre-owned. We went through it. No, they don't go through it. I checked out one at a Toyota dealer once for a customer, and it was low on oil. The oil didn't even register on the dipstick. And it was a certified pre-owned vehicle by Toyota. Yeah, they didn't even check the oil. Well, the European automakers are starting to slump big time. Mercedes is now the latest to cut their 2024 forecast of what they're going to sell. And one of the big deals is the Chinese are not buying Mercedes much anymore. They're making their own cars, right? Mercedes cited China as the main driver of the downgrade because they weren't buying the cars like they used to. Hey, the Chinese are wising up. They're like, hey, the quality of this German stuff, not what it used to be, right? And all the European cars, Volvo, Stellantis, they all went down with it. The stock value at any rate. Now, the interesting thing is, Mercedes is against tariffs of Chinese cars coming into Germany and coming into Europe, for that matter, because they want to sell their cars to China. And if they put a tariff on the Chinese cars, guess what? The Chinese put a tariff on their cars and they won't sell them. They don't care about the overall perspective of what's good or what's bad. All they know is our bottom line is we want those Chinese to buy our Mercedes. And if we start putting tariffs, they'll raise our prices. You hardly sell any of them. And here's what Mercedes says. Boy, they're even getting into real estate now. Our change was, quote, triggered by a further deterioration of the macroeconomic environment, primarily driven by weaker Chinese consumption and a prolonged downturn in the country's real estate sector. They're even blaming real estate on it now, They don't want to use the word recession, I mean, can you have a recession in a communist country? That's a good question, isn't it? Theoretically, it would be impossible. And BMW last week, they lost a bunch of the value in the stock for the same reason. The Chinese aren't buying BMWs either. Guess the Chinese have given up with luxury European cars? Well, I gave up on them decades ago, so hey, they caught up with me now. Well, Ford now says it's gone for good. What is gone for good? Their stupid parking assist system. It didn't work worth beans anyway. Ford now says they're cutting it from all their cars to save money. They called it Enhanced Active Park System. It was a hands-free parallel parking system, and I tried it, and I thought it was garbage. I didn't think it worked all that well. Well, Ford is claiming, they never tell you the truth, but they're claiming that, hardly anybody ever used it, so we're cutting it off the cars. Basically, they can make the cars cheaper, right? They charge more and more for the cars, but they make them cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. But don't do it and then say, this costs too much money. We're not going to do that anymore. Basically, Ford wants to reduce their production costs because they got to cut something. Their quality's bad. You can see they've led the United States for years now in most recalls of anything. So maybe if they get rid of all their options, they won't be recalled as much because there's less things to break. Maybe that's their policy, right? But I thought the system was garbage anyway. I tried it out in customers' cars, and I said, bleh. And they said the same thing. They said, we tried it out. It really doesn't work that well, so we don't even bother using it anymore. And they're saying, Ford says, well, hardly anybody uses it. Well, you know why, Ford? Because it doesn't work that well. The people I know that owned them and tried it said, this doesn't work very well, so I'm not using it. And their excuse is, well, nobody was using it, so we're not going to make them anymore. Not that, gee, it really didn't work that good. They'll never admit that. Well, General Motors is partnering with Chicago-based company in a project that they say could change the world. Now, in this case, I have to agree with General Motors for once. Usually they screw everything up. But unlike old Elon trying to make these battery electric semi-trucks, which are absurd, they don't work. Anybody can see it's a massive failure. He only made a handful of them. He was supposed to have, 20, 40,000 of them out by now, and there's 100 or less than 100 of them out there. They weigh too much. They can't go that far, yada, 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 right? Well, General Motors is partnering with this company for making more efficient fuel cells. And what are they going to use the fuel cells for? 18-wheelers, buses. That makes a lot more sense than battery electric ones. These are commercial, so they can have hydrogen stations around to feed the fuel cells. They know where they're going to, the big trucks, the buses. They know exactly where they're going, so they can plan to fill them up here, there, and there. And of course, fuel cells, if they use hydrogen, they're just filled with hydrogen, so it's not like you're sitting there charging a battery. It doesn't take all that much longer than filling a diesel truck with diesel. So now this is way in the future that it'll come up, but I like the idea that General Motors is partnering with this company to make more efficient fuel cells at a high volume, so the cost will be there, because that makes sense for large vehicles, not battery electric large vehicles. It just doesn't work. There is a battery electric locomotive in Australia that I read about, right? And I thought, okay, how are they going to pull heavy things with a battery electric locomotive? Well, it turns out that locomotive is hooked up to a regular diesel, and it just assists power for the diesel because it hauls rocks from a mine somewhere. And luckily for them, the trip with rocks downhill. They can charge the batteries of the electric battery locomotive while they're going down the hill. And then when they're going up the hill, it can help push the empty train back up the hill. So it's a very limited usage, right? They could never put a battery electric locomotive to pull those rocks, because if they did, it would probably go 3, 4, 5 miles and run out of power. The weight of trains is insane, right? But if you want to use fuel cells, it's a completely different story. With trucks, buses, start with the big stuff if you're going to use fuel cells. The small stuff that we drive around, there's such a dramatic, radical transformation would have to be done. It would cost a fortune. It would take decades, right? But you could do it with large vehicles because they're commercial. They know where they're going. They can have the hydrogen station set up. It makes a lot more sense than stupid, gigantic battery trucks and buses. Now, scientists are always coming up with things. This is why I tell you, don't buy into this future technology until it's proven to work and can be done at a massive scale. Now, scientists have come up with what they call special electrodes that can split seawater to produce hydrogen and not produce chlorine gas, which is, of course, poisonous. Because there's a lot of salt in seawater, right? NaCl. So, you get chlorine gas comes out. This new system using special electrodes, they claim, doesn't do that. Now, they're all talking about making hydrogen fuel. For cars, probably way, way in the future. For big trucks, buses, Walmart's already got fuel cell electric big delivery trucks. In Canada, they're trying them out, and they run on hydrogen, right? Now, this is a small-scale thing. They're planning on making up to 4,000 of these anodes and cathodes in factory in California, 4,000 of them a year, and they're going to use in a demonstration plant that's being built in Singapore, so it's not built yet. And they said it can produce 300 kilograms of hydrogen a day. 300 kilograms, about 2.2 pounds, this is like 600-something pounds. That isn't squat, right? We're talking, this is just an experiment they're starting out with. Plus, by its very name, it uses electricity to split the hydrogen from the oxygen and H2O, right? So there's more energy. Where's this energy coming from? You keep adding layer upon layer of more energy expense. That's the one reason they first thought, we'll make battery electric cars because we got electricity, it'll charge the battery store it, and then it'll use them, right? But then they found out they weigh too much, they explode, they cost too much money to make, they may not last all that long, right? They're a great idea, but in the real world, they don't work out all that well as they stand today. But if you're going to turn seawater into hydrogen, you got to use electricity to do that. That's a tremendous amount of energy you're going to be using to create the hydrogen, and then you turn the hydrogen into electricity in the car. So you're using electricity to make hydrogen to make electricity. So it's an extra step. It's going to use more energy, right? That's just common sense. So anybody that thinks this stuff is in the near future is out of their mind. They have interesting technology. Can it be scalable? Nobody knows. Their demonstration factory is going to make 300 kilograms a day. I mean, if you would realize the amount of hydrogen that would be needed to power these big trucks, it would make your head spin. 300 kilograms a day is less than a spit in the bucket. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.